Well, morning, afternoon. It depends on where you are, I guess. So good morning, good afternoon, maybe good evening if you're from somewhere else far away. I'm Karl, and I'm the host of this, what we call CXBS, or CX behind the scenes. Not lest you think it BS stood for anything else. There's no goal to be had here. Just a little background here. I run a small consulting business called Verizon CX. And one of the main outputs of Verizon CX is a course in the basic fundamentals of customer experience called CX-PRO. And its aim is to help those who are new to the profession, new to the field, get off on the right foot and become as productive and as effective as they can in their role as soon as possible. And we are a business partner of QuestionPro and serve as a resource to QuestionPro clients to help them use the technology in the context of CX best practices. And what I'd like to start out here is I'm going to ask Mr. Mark Mandel to just give us a brief intro to QuestionPro. So Mark, I'll turn it over to you for a moment here.
Thanks, Karl. It's nice to speak with all of you guys today. Thank you all for letting me join your call. I'm Mark Mandel. I'm a vice president here at QuestionPro and eager to chat with you guys today. By way of quick introduction, if you don't know QuestionPro, we are a pretty exciting company in the area of a full stack deliverable in the world of customer experience feedback, management, and analytics. So think about the typical customer experience measurement programs, analytics programs, and related workflow. QuestionPro is a pretty unique place in terms of how we can handle that entire end-to-end process. We will wrap, obviously consulting around it. We'll wrap the best technology with it and give you guys a good end-to-end offering in that space. A pretty unique offering. One of the things that makes us really most unique, though, is this idea of journey-based feedback, which we'll talk about on another call in the future. But this whole idea that imagine now being able to marry together customer journey and customer feedback into a single capability, and that's pretty exciting too. Karl, do you mind if I take a moment here and talk not so much about QuestionPro, but just since we're here as a team collectively, to talk about NPS, to share an interesting NPS war story to get this kicked off?
Well, I think a war story would be a good place to start, so go for it, Mark.
So I was going to tell you guys or share with you a story. This dates me a little bit. It goes back a good number of years, probably close to 9 or 10 years ago now. The team I was with at the time was asked by a large insurance company to help them measure their Net Promoter Score for the first time. They'd never really done it before. And so we did a little bit of a baseline study for them. And a lot of people don't really love their insurance companies, generically speaking. And not a big surprise, they got a resoundingly low score at the time. They were literally a below zero Net Promoter Score. And so I remember the CEO of that particular company called me and he said, "What's our score?" And I told him, and he said, what does that mean? And I explained to him that we're measuring loyalty by way of advocacy, and we're measuring a sense of, hey, would you recommend us to a friend or colleague, as a measure of belief in the brand and the business and the relationship holistically. And he said, and what do the numbers mean? And I said, well, it's a way to get a score, and typically you're measured on a 0 to 10 scale, I told him. So 0 to 10, 11-point scale. And the top 2 boxes, those 9s and 10s, they call promoters. And the bottom 6 boxes at 0, we'll call them, or bottom 7 boxes, we'll call them detractors, and the middle guys are passives. And he said, top 2 boxes are promoters. And I said, yeah. And I said, those are the people who would most likely recommend you. He said, well, wouldn't my score go up if I counted the 7s and 8s and not just the 9s and 10s? And while sure, mathematically it would, but it defeats the entire purpose and the elegance of NPS. And at the end of the day, we tried to explain to him that NPS has a really critical role in this entire journey that all of us are on. And that role it plays is not just a scorekeeping role, but an ability to open a conversation with a customer around why they feel the way they feel. And to pair that score question with a, tell us why. and then use the tell us why question to drive action. And if we have the ability to make the right actions at the right times with the right customers, we'll tend to improve things overall. So like with that customer, he was just so caught up in chasing a score. And I wanted to caution us to say, there needs to be more in our net promoter thinking than just chasing a score. And we'll talk more about that on this call.
Yeah, well, thanks, Mark. And that's a perfect segue into the topic for today. And I want to move on here and introduce my guest today. My guest presenter is Mr. Jim Bass. Jim and I originally connected some years ago through the CXPA, or Customer Experience Professionals Association. Jim also serves on the advisory board of my organization, Horizon CX, and has considerable industry experience in customer experience, and we share the CCXP certification. And Jim also participates on projects with Horizon CX from time to time. So I'll turn the program over to Jim and ask him to introduce himself and today's topic, and which is winning with NPS. And I'd also like to remind everybody on the call today that this is a conversation, so I encourage people to be on camera if they so choose, and participate by asking questions. You can raise your hand, you can put it in the chat to either make a comment or ask a question. So I'll turn it over to Jim right now. Jim?
Awesome. Greetings, everybody. Thanks for joining. NPS is one of the my passionate topics that I enjoy talking about. So one of the things that Karl didn't mention in the introduction there is that I'm also NPS certified. And so what that means is I actually went and spent a week with Deborah Eastman, who is kind of like the sister of Fred Reichheld as far as NPS goes. So she was there at the inception or the conception of NPS, and I got to learn at her feet and certify under her. So I had her undivided attention for a week, and then I was able to take the test. But I learned so much from it, and I began to bring it to the companies that I worked for. So I worked for McKesson Corporation, and using the principles that I learned from Deborah Eastman, we were able to improve our NPS score by 40 points in 1 year. At ADP, we were able to identify trends and identify needs and able to turn around their NPS as well and get them up into positive digits that stayed and are still there today. At Verizon Connect, I did the same thing. I began to work with them to help them really look at NPS the right way. So as we go through today's conversation, and I want to share a lot of the things that I learned and that I've used that are tried and true. The big thing you're probably going to notice is we have a distinction between a net promoter score and a net promoter system. And unfortunately, they both have an S. And so when you see NPS, people assume it's the score. So I'm going to be always calling out the system, because the system is where we get our power from. And so I want to be able to kind of show you some of those things. So as we begin this today, I want to start with a poll of the audience just to get your thoughts on what you really think the primary value of NPS is. So, and taking that as however you want to consider it, as a score or as a system. Pauline has got a poll for us that we can interact with.
Hi guys, so if you could just scan the QR code on your mobiles. Oh yeah, we'll see. Travis, Mark, NDV, Ken, Karl. And so just gonna go ahead and pop it on the chat.
You know, I'm getting this, but it's asking me to play a game. Okay.
Oh, well, wait. Yeah, that's live polls.
Okay, there we go.
So I'm just gonna wait like 20 seconds more. We are 16 on the call. We have 8, 9 now, 10.
I can't
Good
get
up, guys. Great.
not giving me the option.
Yeah, what do you do with the game?
Oh, just wait. No, it's just a game while you wait for this to start a question. So it's, yeah, basically.
Paulina, I'm
So,
putting in the pin of the poll and it's not taking me anywhere.
yeah, if you can just go to the chat, I shared the link as well. So you can just click on it. It's like another
okay.
alternative. Yep. Alrighty, so I'm just gonna start the question.
Oh, hold on. I'm gonna get there. Okay, I think I'm there now.
Perfect. Yeah, Karl, 2 page. Alrighty. So what do you feel is the primary benefit of the Net Promoter System? We got 9, 10, 11, 3 more to go. 2. And here we go.
All right, so these are our results. Awesome. Thank you guys for playing this poll with us here. So I love it. The first and largest number of votes is for providing a key customer experience metric. And then second up, delivering actionable customer insights. And then third would be ensuring a better customer experience. So this is a really good spread.
So interesting, Jim, is that nobody said it offered little or no value.
Yeah, or driving increased financial performance as well.
Yeah.
It's tough to measure that financial performance piece. I would have loved to said that I cracked that nut, but
That's a really good observation and comment. That is true. It's so far removed from the immediacy of NPS, right?
Yeah, and
I'm trying every day.
well, there's a whole piece of this, the Net Promoter certification that I went through that actually talks about how you can connect the dollars and then connect it to the performance as well. We're not going to be focusing on that today. We're really hitting the big higher pieces where you get the most bang for your buck from an experience perspective and an engagement perspective. But
there's a giant caveat, by the way, Jim.
Yeah.
To any of the answers here, right? Because no system is worth its weight or what it's written on if there is no believability in it and what it can do. And that means from the top of the house, because you can shout as much as you want about anything, about a score, about a driver. If it doesn't have top of the house buy-in and believability and accountability, right? None of this matters.
Yep. Yeah, and it's a great point you bring up, Rich. And I want to kind of look back here at the scores here or the poll here, and just really call out that everyone's really using it as a key customer experience metric. And I want to call out that was not the purpose of Net Promoter Systems or the Net Promoter Score, but that's what it has turned into be. It's become a key customer experience metric for many companies. And NPS is all about predicting loyalty. It's not really about a customer experience metric. So I'm going to show you how to look at this in maybe a slightly different way, and how you can see the score more as an output and not as the goal or the purpose. So what I want to do is I've got some slides to help kind of guide the conversation. They're not really like read all these slides. It's more just kind of pictures to help drive the conversation and the topic. But then we're going to land on a big slide, which I call the money slide, which goes into a lot of these details of how we use Net Promoter System. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So hold one second here while I do that. Share. Okay, everybody see that okay?
Yep.
All right. And
Yep.
we get over to the controls there. All right, so the main thing is that, when we talk about Net Promoter Systems, and Net Promoter Scores, we're using that always to talk about loyalty. It's a predictor of loyalty. And that's what a Net Promoter System was meant to do. And the Net Promoter Score is really trying to give you just a quick little blip in time to show you where you are and how your customers are perceiving you. And what is that loyalty metric, basically? How are you Are you having more people that are promoting you or more people that are detracting from you? So when you have a net promoter system and you become mature with it, so you've been using it for a while, they're going to do more than just predict loyalty. So you'll have your loyalty prediction, but it's also going to give you ways to cultivate loyalty and cultivate a customer-centric culture. So one of the things that will enable you to do is that your customer-facing roles are there now to kind of create the promoters. The business can now deliver improvements and structure themselves for customer needs. And this all helps drive that customer-centric culture. And hopefully that effortless experience is part of that. Effortless is one of the only correlations to loyalty that have been able to be really factually determined scientifically. So the lower the effort it takes for the customers to work with your business, the higher their loyalty, and vice versa. The harder it is to work with your company, the more effort they have to expend, the lower the loyalty. So as you think about cultivating, think about a gardener, right? Think about a farmer. They don't just throw seeds out and just hope for the best, right? They're very intentional, very purposeful. And so when you think about customer-facing roles, those are kind of like the people that are watering the plants every day in the garden. When the business is delivering improvements, that's like improving the soil. Maybe it's the fertilizers, and it's maybe a way of keeping pests away with insecticides or something more organic. Structuring it for customer needs. So how can we focus on what these plants need that we're cultivating, right? And rather than what the business is needing. And this all starts to bring in this customer-centric culture. And if you've got an effortless experience goal, we're never going to get to zero effort. There's always going to be some effort, but really focusing down to get rid of much effort as possible. This is really going to help you cultivate that loyalty, and a mature net promoter system can help you get there. So if it can do all these great things, then why do we have this problem? And so I'm looking here at this picture of this frayed rope, right? So you got this thing being pulled and it's starting to break. And I think a lot of companies implement NPS with an idea that all of a sudden magical things will happen with customer experience and everything's going to be good because I'm looking at the right score. But what's happened really is NPS has really become kind of a stretched concept that's been pulled out of shape by overuse and misuse. So it was intended for one thing. So for example, I'll try to show this. There's a book called Winning on Purpose by Fred Reichheld. So after he wrote his first book on NPS, he's now just written this other one a couple of years ago. And he shares in there that when he first developed this, he wasn't going to call it a net promoter score, because the goal of the whole system that he had devised was really about enriching people's lives. And that was the main focus. So he really wanted to call this the Net Lives Enriched Score. Now, not only is that hard to say, it probably doesn't look like a very nice acronym. And he also mentions that he knew that would not be a term that companies could really connect with and make something happen. So he called it the Net Promoter Score, and then it became to take it on its own life. And what kind of happened with this? My advancing is not working. Is that because we're now focusing on a Net Promoter Score, chasing the score became the focus. So analyzing the score, explaining the score, defending the score, not understanding the score, and whatever we can do to improve the score, just do it. So that's gaming the system. It's all these things that kind of come in. These score, chasing the score became the focus. And so what happened, we got our employees start having a lot of score-based behaviors instead of customer-centric behaviors, because their goal is to increase the score. And really the reason we have this overuse and misuse is because there were really misunderstandings about what is the system all about? What is it supposed to accomplish? What should it achieve? And how do we do it? Instead, people just kind of took it and it's like, okay, I have to ask this question, I have to do this calculation, and then I get a score, and then everything else will be magically wonderful. But that's not what happened. And so a lot of companies feel themselves in this tug right here, like this rope is showing. So really not using the system the right way. So the focus here is really like we got to use the right tool the right way. You know, you wouldn't use a rake to dig a hole, and you wouldn't use a shovel to water your plants, and you're not going to, you know, use a saw to trim your bushes. You could use a saw to trim your bushes, but you're not going to get the best result. You may not get the most elegant result, and you're going to maybe use a lot more effort. So it's all about using the right tool the right way. And as we go through this, what you'll hear me say is that when you're doing the right things, the score will take care of itself. So focus on the right things and then let the score show you what you've done. So the quite big question then is, how do we leverage this net promoter system, right? And we got to do those right things. So first breakdown, when we start looking at net promoter system and we start collecting the data from our survey respondents, is we're going to be putting the promoters to work, engaging those passives, converting detractors to trusted advisors, reaching out to those non-responders. Those are some of those tactical things that we're going to do with that audience. But then as a result of the data we're getting from their feedback, is we're going to improve those products, services, and relationships and simplify the business processes. So this is part of this whole system. Now, how do we play in there, and what kind of goals can we establish for our teams and our departments and our business so that we are driving the right behaviors and getting the right responses? So the first thing is you have to remember or know, in a net promoter system, the focus is always on the promoters, because promoters bring in new customers who become promoters. So you want to make sure you can give them a mouthpiece and a platform to really promote your business. So the number one goal of any net promoter system is really to increase the volume of promoters by activating your current promoters, giving them a voice. So, you know, increasing your reference customers by a certain percent or number, that could be a better goal than focusing on the score. Launching advocacy programs, deploying white papers and testimonials and videos from your promoters, or a way to give them a platform and a mouthpiece. Because, you know, when you want to put your promoters to work, sometimes people think, well, yeah, I'd recommend you. Does that mean that while I'm at the gym and I'm lifting weights, I'm talking about how great ADP is? Or does it mean while I'm at choir practice on Wednesday night, I'm talking about how great Verizon is? Or when I'm flipping burgers in my backyard, I'm talking about how great McKesson is to my neighbors. And that's really not what we want to do. We want to give them the channels and the platform that help us really get the promoter's voice out there in a way that brings in more customers and more promoters. Now, passives, we know passives are, you know, the scores of 7 and 8s. And that means they're kind of on the fence. They're passive. They're kind of neutral. But, you know, the real thing about a passive is they just need a reason to become a promoter. Oh, or a detractor, right? So let's give them a reason to become a promoter. If we ignore them because they're not a promoter and they're not a detractor and we're focusing in different areas, then the passive will go like the wind. They'll go negative when the winds go negative, and they'll go positive when winds go positive. So just engage with them. That's all they really need. Tell them what you're doing to improve. Tell them how you're taking in the data from all your customers, and give them some regular progress updates on what you're doing to improve. So some goals you might want to think about are maybe converting a certain percentage of your passives to promoters, being very strategic, obviously looking at maybe the dollars and cents they bring in, or other customers they may be attached to, or the industries that they're could be influencing. So converting a percentage of them to promoters, and really using a number of quarterly communications. And when I'm talking about quarterly communications, I don't really mean specifically to them. It could be to your whole customer base. But these quarterly communications will help keep all of your customers informed. The next is the detractors. And it seems like everyone's focused on detractors. So as soon as your net promoter survey goes out and you get a detractor, you know, the whole company wants to turn that detractor into a promoter. But, you know, that doesn't happen with a phone call, and it doesn't happen overnight. And really, there are a lot of detractors that you're going to have to just let go because they're just not right for the product, or they never will use the product or service the right way, or they always will be unhappy. So you want to make sure that you're being strategic, but you want to convert your detractors to trusted advisors. They may never become a passive. They may never become a promoter, but if you can convert them into a trusted advisor, then all the things that you do with them are going to, as they say, rising tides lifts all boats. So all the improvements that you make because of your trusted advisor relationship with your detractors, they're going to really help you make specific improvements that are going to help all your customers. And those are also messages that you can give your whole customer base about what you're doing, which creates more engagement, and even that can sway passives into the promoter area. So make them your trusted advisors. Show them that you're listening and taking action. Maybe put a goal in there to convert X% of your detractors into trusted advisors. And for these, monthly communications are probably more specific and more targeted for them. And that may be where, this communication would maybe only go to your detractors or your trusted advisors, but being able to keep them in tune with what's happening on a regular basis is how you're going to create that trust and keep their engagement. The next area here is reaching out to non-responders. For the most part, no one really looks at the non-responders, and they are the greatest risk. So your non-responders, those are the folks they're not engaged, and they're just waiting for one more reason to switch to your competitor. They're tired of telling you what to do to keep their business, and they've probably told you in multiple different surveys, and they're tired of telling you because nothing seems to happen. So really what you want to do here is have some strategy and some plan about your non-responders. You want to increase your survey response rate. Monthly communications will also help this as well. But really from a goal perspective too, think about personally recommitting to X% of non-responders. And those are conversations. This is not where you can take your Marketo software and push out messages to them, or where you can just send email templates or things like this. These are conversations. These are relationships that you want to have with your customers and get them out of that non-responding area. Because what will happen is as soon as you start having these communications that are going to all your base, and you're talking about what they're telling you in the surveys and what you're doing to improve, everyone's going to read these, and the non-responders are going to say things like, you know what, I was really thinking about switching to this other company, but now I see they're taking all the feedback from these customers and they have all these initiatives. It's going to cost me another $200,000 to switch, retraining my staff and reorganizing my business and new processes. But you know what, I think I'll just stay with the company now since they're trying to make a difference. So this is what you're trying to do, is get people to see what you're doing and how you're doing it. So then as you begin to really start to take the data that they're giving you and improve those products and services and relationships, the way you really do that is taking action on those customer insights. And another key piece here that we tend to lose track of is incorporate those employee insights. Your employees know more about the experience being delivered to their customers than even the customers know. The customers have forgotten stuff because they don't even ask about it anymore because it didn't work before. But your employees know the processes and tools that they have to go through to deliver the experience. They know the weaknesses there. So be sure to bring in the employee insights here as well. And as you begin to improve your products and services, invite the customers to help validate and prioritize those improvements, and be sure to provide regular process or progress updates. Your goal here could be just implement an improvement plan. Define what your improvement plan is. What are the inputs? How do customer insights and employee insights drive the improvements? And again, quarterly communications. The way I did this at McKesson is the improvements that we needed to make were software, support, staffing, and training with a new customer. And so what I did is I just made sure that they were engaged. They wanted to have this new product or this new update to the product. I got the product team to do webinars every month and ask them about the product. Do you want to have it oriented this way or this way? When I click this button, what do you want to have it do? And these engagements with the customers, and then us talking about them to the whole customer base, began to just bring in so many more response rates and so much higher scores as well. And then our retention was obviously tremendously impacted. We had some of the best retention in the company for many years running. All right, so as we look at all this, simplifying the business processes, simplifying the business infrastructure, what's going to be really important here is increasing that cross-functional collaboration And that word collaboration can incorporate so many different things, cross-functional teams, communications, outings, even creating handoffs with your processes that will help create that better collaboration. But bottom line, really make it easier for employees to do business inside your organization. So that means they can get things done easier and quicker for your customers. And then using that simpler language and do it internally and externally. As soon as you begin using a language, your customer kind of gets the cue that they have to speak your language rather than you speaking their language. And that gives a subliminal message that you have to get with our process and our program, rather than I'm focusing on you and we're getting with your process and your program. So these are some really overt strategies that you can do to really help bring that engagement. So some of the goals here would be just, even just a business simplification strategy. And then once you start executing, you'll have goals upon that. Again, the quarterly communications. The more we can communicate all the things we're doing to not only just our customer base, but to our employees as well, the more engagement we'll get out of both of those sets of audiences, as well as more happiness, more satisfaction. And this, because it's going to be easier, it's going to make it something that they can really interact with and feel good about, and therefore be more loyal to it. So at this point, I want to take this and go into our breakout discussions, because I've showed you a lot of different types of things that you could be doing for goals that would then drive the behaviors that would improve the customer's experience. So I've got another slide here just to kind of show you about for our breakout session. So the main thing to remember here is that measurements are going to drive the behaviors. So we got to select measurements and measures or metrics that are going to really create that customer-centric behavior versus that score-based behavior. So what we're going to do in the breakout session is just brainstorm some measures and goals, and I don't say we need to answer all of these bullets, right? Maybe pick one of these bullets, but these are just some conversation starters, places for you maybe to look. So, engage, activate, and secure promoters. So what are some measures and goals you could do there for engaging and converting passives to promoters, or converting detractors to trusted advisors? How you might want, what are some of the goals you might want to use to recommit to non-responders? And then how do we use this to foster a more customer-centric culture from this Net Promoter System? And how we might use that Net Promoter System to improve employee and customer engagement. So those are the things that we're going to be looking at in the breakout session. So Paulina or Karl, do one of you want to talk about how the breakout session will work?
Paulina's going to do the breakouts here. So it's going to just be a random selection here. It looks like we have 13 people here. So maybe 3 groups, maybe 3 groups, Paulina? What do you
Absolutely.
think?
Yeah, I can arrange that. Just give me 1 second.
We'll do this for roughly 10 minutes, and we'll come back and kind of summarize here. I know a couple of questions came in here, so we'll address those at that time too, Jim.
All right, cool. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. So I'm set.
Got it.
Okay, guys. So here we go.
All right, as everybody's coming back, you will be automatically muted. So if you get ready to say something, just realize that you will be automatically muted. It looks like we've got most everybody back.
I was going to say, because in our breakout here, Chris, you were on to something there, and we didn't get a chance to finish it. Did you want to finish up what you were saying? Because the question was how much of this is applying to, you're in the transportation business, so how much of what we're talking about here is applying to that? And I think there was kind of an interesting perspective there. Chris, you want to share it?
Yeah, so I'm in a public transit agency here in Atlanta, and when we think about our people that use transit, we've got people who are kind of have to use it for financial reasons, and there are other people who are kind of true advocates that just really for sustainability reasons or whatever their own reasons utilize public transit. And so for me, thinking about this net promoter idea is really to activate those advocates to help us kind of shift the overall culture to be kind of more, pro transit. That's kind of what I was getting at, Karl.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Yeah, so it's almost like your advocates or your promoters in a way.
Exactly. So we can activate those people more. That really helps us move the needle on right.
Yeah, so like in Net Promoter certification, I mean, they were really saying that bottom line, if you did nothing more than just activate your promoters, that will handle everything. But we always tend to focus on the detractors because we just hate the fact that we have detractors. And so we spend all this time on our detractors rather than even focusing on the promoters. And we thank the promoters because we're so glad they didn't ding us. Now we're not going to get in trouble. We don't really stop and do the work of let's amplify those voices. And that's because if you did nothing else but amplify those voices, that should handle everything that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, I think of them as kind of our sales force, if you will.
Now, did we have any others from the other breakouts that we weren't in? So Jim and I got to be in the same breakout, oddly enough. But from the other breakouts, were there any other aha moments that anyone would like to share?
Karl and Jim, let's reflect from our group. We were talking in our little breakout about something very similar to what Jim was talking about a second ago, but it was in a different context. We spoke about companies that are looking at customer feedback broadly and Net Promoter as a component of that, sometimes are intimidated at really bringing in customer feedback meaningfully because they're afraid to have it seen as the complaint system and another way for people to get in trouble with their bosses when they get low scores or angry comments that need to be followed up on. And the reality, as I said, I once got a call from an HR leader who said, my people don't need another way to get yelled at. Thank you anyway. And we said, well, what if we could create an artificial situation where we're filtering out, for now, everything but the good stuff and start to socialize the good feedback so people are psychologically willing to not just accept, but to pursue feedback because it's going to be the good news coming back from their customers. And then over time, dial it back a little bit to be more balanced and honest, but start off just the high promoters and just start socializing promoters and show all how, because there's always going to be a healthy number of those people. Let's go advertise them to everybody and make them people who serve those promoters heroes. And to do that in an intentionally one-sided way to start, to kind of get their mental state wired up to want to pursue feedback and not just be afraid of it.
Yeah, so speaking of the feedback, I see there's a question out here on the chat. Mike Kennedy, you were asking about how can we verify that the survey feedback we're receiving is a true reflection of how people feel and is not biased. That's always the thing, right? We're always trying to make sure that the data has as least bias as possible and that it's a true reflection. And so the one way we do that is by survey design, making sure we're asking the right questions in the right order with the right words, and that we really have a goal for what we're trying to understand, and that we're making it as easy for them to interact with it as possible, and that we're sending it to them or we're asking them information at the right time. So for example, after if you've had a company come in and implement some software for you, when is the right time to ask them the questions, right? Is it right after the implementation, or is it after they've been using it after they've had their training, or after they have been live for X number of days or weeks or months, or until they start achieving their first outcomes? So timing is also important. So survey design and deployment is the best way to make sure you're getting the best information and that it's a true reflection and has as least bias in it as possible.
And Jim, it reminds me of, talk about the improper use of the whole system. And idea is, when you bring your car in for service and they don't let you go, they get you a stranglehold on your neck and they won't let you go until you give them a 10. So it kind of makes you wonder that anybody who is using the Net Promoter Score or system in any way like that it's not believable when they tell you what their scores are, as an organization, where in 80 and 90 and stuff like that. How do you believe that score? You can't believe when you see all unusually high stuff like that, especially from a business like that. you kind of question whether it's real or not. So, because a lot of organizations do chase that score and they're using it for bragging rights, to say we measure up to other benchmarks in the industry, but that's a whole nother conversation about benchmarks that I don't want to get into right now, because we could spend the next hour on that. Suffice it to say, there are no benchmarks except your internal measurement against yourself. At least from my perspective, that's the way it is, though.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I know this discussion is about Net Promoter Score or scores in general. But as a researcher, you have to look at insights and data from a broad perspective. So whether you're using your NPS survey and or other things, you look at your complaint management system, you look at your social media posts, you look at your employee feedback, you have roundtable discussions, you have in-depth interviews. As a CX professional, you have to use all of the tools in your toolkit. Jim, when you were talking about all of the tools, I'm thinking about not just surveys, right? I know there's a lot of survey folks on here, but there's qualitative research through in-depth interviews. So whatever makes sense to explore the whole ecosystem of feedback, meeting your customers and your employees where they are, so that feedback is looked at in an aggregated, always on, relevant fashion, so that at the end of the day, you're not just closing the loop, one at a time with these folks, but you're looking at the outer loop feedback and seeing the larger root causes of things that affect the promoters, the passives, the detractors, in a combination of ways. So I just look at it from a larger feedback system, if you will.
Thank you, Richard.
Yeah,
Jim, you put something in the message in the chat there. I think you might want to.
Yeah. So let me just speak to those real quick. So so Paige, you had a question about certification program for Net Promoter. So I put that link in there. It's done through Satmetrics, and that's where Deborah Eastman worked, and Fred as well at one point. Also, I put a link to an article that really, it's not really an article like you read an article. It's almost like one of these little animated videos. It's very easy to watch and it doesn't take very long, but it really shows how not to apply NPS. So it really gives you some really good real life situations that you can kind of, maybe you'll see some things that you've heard before, maybe you've seen them in your company. And then also, Rich, you were mentioning about this whole ecosystem of voice, VOC coming in. So I just threw another few things in there, like advisory boards, roundtable sessions, escalations, exit interviews, in-app feedback, online reviews. I mean, there's so many places. And one of the best places that we overlook all the time on top of our employees is your CRM. So every problem ticket that comes in, your complaint system, all of those have a piece of VOC. It's not coming to you as an answer to a survey, but you're seeing it as, oh, I got 10,000 of these problems happen a year. How can I just fix those 10,000 problems, save me some money, but also make my customers super happy by fixing that one problem that happens 10,000 times in a year. So there's so many places to bring you this in, Rich. So thanks for bringing that up.
Well, good. Thanks, everybody here. I know we're pressed here. We went a little bit over time here, which is okay. We tend to do that, it seems. But I want to thank you, Jim, for your presentation and all your insights here. And hopefully folks got at least one shred of an idea or a nugget out of that today. Next month, we're going to have Mr. Mark Mandel, who happens to be on camera here, waving his hand, to talk about artificial intelligence and its relation to CX and where it can help CX go in the future or hinder it from where it's going in the future, probably a little bit of each. It's something we can't ignore. That's something we have to grapple with. And so, Mark, you want to just say a couple of words about that? I think, in fact, it would be on the 21st of March. Paulina, you can verify that for me if that's our tendency is to do the third. The third Tuesday of the month at 11 Central Time. And if that's still the case, we'll move ahead with that. But Mark, do you want to say a couple of words about that?
Sure. AI has been unavoidably in the news in the last couple of months. I mean, the growth of products like ChatGPT and others have been all over the place. but I wanted to tell you that these are not new ideas. They're not new concepts. You know, we've seen inklings of this for nearly 30 years now. And, you know, what we're hoping to cover on the 21st of next month is a little bit of a cautionary tale around some of this stuff, and to look at it through the lens of some of the things we've learned from the past and apply them going forward in our own CX practices and our own CX business. So take it through the lens of what everything that's old is new again. We'll talk about what those things are and how they've come about yet again, and the lessons that we've learned from them in the past and how we apply those lessons going forward.
That reminds me, Mark, of the Who song, "We Won't Get Fooled Again." Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. And with that, I want to thank everybody for episode 3 of CXBS, where there's no BS, but it's all talk and discussion. And thank everybody. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. And we'll see you next month.
Have a good one.
Thank you, guys.